just jumping on to do a quick live video to take you through some important compass constructions that I've been doing lots of work on with my students this week. Now, your perpendicular bisectors are one of the types of compass constructions that are needed for GCSE, and this can be something that sometimes people find a bit tricky because of the number of steps involved. So I'm just going to take you through a couple of the perpendicular bisectors that you'll be required to do for your GCSE Maths. These appear on both higher and foundation. So first of all, what's the purpose of a perpendicular bisector? So perpendicular means at right angles, and a bisector is a line that cuts another line in half. So we're going to draw a line that crosses these two lines I've just drawn on the paper at 90 degrees. Okay, so just going to check the focus is as it can be. Okay, so what we're going to do first of all, this is one of our constructions that we do with our ruler and our compasses. Okay, so first of all, we take our compass, we make sure that our compass isn't too slippy. You don't want it too firm so you can't move it, but you don't want it so it's going to slip out when you press down on it. Okay, so you might find it helpful just to tighten this screw up here. So the first thing we do when I do our perpendicular bisector is we put our compass point at one end of the line that we're going to be doing our perpendicular bisector for. We make sure our compass is stretched out more than halfway, and then we do an arc at the top or an arc above the line and an arc below the line. Okay, and then without altering the setting of a compass, we put our compass point on the other end of the line, and then we do an arc at the bottom and an arc at the top. And the objective here, if I just zoom in a little bit, is you can see that results in two crosses that we're then going to be able to join up with a line. So you'll notice I'm bringing in my ruler or my straight edge, and I'm just lining that up so I can draw my line that goes through those two crosses. And then if you were to bring in your protractor and you were to measure this angle, you would find that that is a 90-degree angle. Okay, now the other thing that's really useful about a perpendicular bisector, if we imagine we'd got one place at either end of that line, with our perpendicular bisector, we have cut that line in half. So basically, we've cut that line between the two blue dots either end in half. Now, if I was to choose any point along my perpendicular bisector line, and if we call one end of the line A and one end of the line B, any point that we might choose along that line is the same distance from A as it is from B. Same distance from A as it is from B. So that's another way in which perpendicular bisectors can be useful if we were using these in an exam, a loci type question. Okay, so I'm going to do one more straightforward perpendicular bisector before we have a look at some of the different permutations that we can need to do for this. So here's another line, slightly longer this time, and we're going to draw our perpendicular bisector. So same starting point. We put our compass at one end, compass point at one end. We do an arc at the top, and then when you're using your compass, you might find it helpful just to sort of angle it slightly like I'm doing, just so you can sort of float it down and draw the arcs. Arc at the top, arc at the bottom. Then move your compass point to the other end of the line and draw your arcs so they cross the first arc that you did. Okay, you don't need to draw them any bigger. As long as they're big enough to go through or cross the other arcs, that's absolutely fine. And then again, we bring in our straight edge, like you can see here. And then we draw our perpendicular bisector. So that line that we've just drawn again is at 90 degrees to our initial line. And if we called the places either end of that line C and D, we have cut the line joining C and D into half. And if I chose any point along that line, that perpendicular bisector that we've drawn, it would be the same distance from C as it would be from D. Okay, so that gives you our basic perpendicular bisector. Now we're going to have a look at two situations where we can draw, still doing a perpendicular bisector, but in a slightly different situation. First of all, we're going to draw a perpendicular bisector through a point that is on a line. So the construction is going to look really similar. There's just one main difference. So this time we would have our line, but rather than our perpendicular bisector being drawn in the middle of that line, our perpendicular bisector is going to go, we want our perpendicular bisector to go through that point. So we have one extra step that we have to do first of all. We start by putting our compass point on the dot. Okay, so we put it on the dot, and then we make sure that our compass is stretched so the pencil reaches to the end of that line. Okay, if I just move it out the way and bring it back in, you can see, yes, it does. And then the first thing that we do is we just turn our compass over and we put an arc that crosses the line. And essentially what that's done is it's put that dot in the middle, oops, just knocking the camera, in the middle from the end of the line to where I've drawn that arc. Okay, and then we do our perpendicular bisector in the usual way. Now when we put the compass point back here, we don't want to do the arcs because otherwise they're not going to be big enough to cross each other. Remember, we've always got to put our compass more than halfway before we do our arc at the top and our arc at the bottom. Now this time we don't go to the end of the line like we did last time, but instead when we do our second set of arcs, we put our compass point where that arc crosses the line. So I'm just going to bring that in, and then again, arc at the top, arc at the bottom. And then what that results in, just like last time, we've got those two crosses that we're going to join up with our straight edge. Okay, so I'm putting my straight edge through here, and when I'm lining up those crosses to draw my perpendicular bisector, you can see it goes straight through the point just there. So that's an example of where we're doing a perpendicular bisector that goes through a point on a line. Now, the last example that I'm going to show you with our perpendicular bisectors is where we're going to draw a perpendicular bisector that goes through a point that is not on a line. And this is often a question that's modelled. So if I just draw our line here, in the last sort of example, we had our dot that was actually on the line. Here, our dot is going to be floating to one side. And the context a question like this could be, it could say something like, we want to draw a road that is going to be the shortest distance to the motorway. If that longer line, for example, was a motorway, we want to do a construction to show the direction the road could go in, so it would be the shortest distance. So that would be the perpendicular. Okay, so just like when the point was on the line, the first thing we do is we put the compass point on the dot. Okay, and then with the compass on the dot and with our compass, we want to just put two arcs crossing our line like I've done just there. So I can see I did one sort of towards the left hand side of the line, and then without changing the compass's width, I did it just here. So where these two arcs are crossing our line has been the same distance from the point because I had the compass set in the same way. Now what I do, again, this time I'm not going to the end of the line. I'm looking at where the arc crosses the line, and then I'm going to stretch my compass out a little bit further, otherwise all it's going to do is cross through the dot. And I like to use the dot as sort of a point of checking. And then I do an arc at the top and an arc at the bottom. And then I move my compass not to the end of the line, but to where that arc that I drew right at the beginning crosses the line. And then without altering the setting of my compass, again, I do an arc at the top and an arc at the bottom. And that's going to result in two crosses that I can join up. Okay, so I bring in my straight edge, I line up the ruler so I can draw a line going through those two crosses, and you can see it's a nice check because it also shows me that that perpendicular bisector is going through that point, not on the line. And again, that perpendicular bisector we've just drawn crosses that original line at right angles. So grab your compasses, grab your ruler, and have a go at drawing some perpendicular bisectors. See you online soon.